Hey, welcome back to Accelerated Investor. Hey, I'm Josh, and I'm so excited to have you on. Today, my guest on the podcast is AJ Osborne. AJ is an absolute stud at owning and managing and structuring self-storage facilities. He owns over $100 million in assets. He's a national speaker, and he was actually on the Accelerated Investor podcast about 18 months ago, back in July of 2020. So I've asked AJ to come back and talk a little bit about how self-storage has changed over the last 18 months with people working from home and with COVID impacting people's work and home life. Secondly, we're going to talk about traits of elite entrepreneurs and how to build an amazing real estate empire and achieve financial freedom. And third, we're going to talk a little bit about the key performance indicators and some performance numbers in self-storage and specifically AJ's portfolio, and how they've held up and done over the last 2 years, roughly, of kind of operating in the middle of COVID. AJ is a stud. He's also a leader in the industry of technology and self-storage automation, and he's built one of the largest facilities in the country that's fully automated using technology. You'll love this interview on our Accelerated Real Estate Investor podcast with AJ Osborne. And of course, if you missed the first one back in July of 2020, make sure you check out that episode as well. Here we go.
Welcome to the Accelerated Investor podcast with Josh Cantwell. If you're looking to retire early with forever passive income, you're in the right place. This podcast is the go-to destination for real estate investors, both active and passive, and multifamily apartment investors, both new, intermediate, and advanced. Now, sit back, listen, learn, and accelerate your business, your life, and your investing with the Accelerated Investor Podcast.
So, hey, Van, listen, I've been really looking forward to having you on the show. Thanks so much for carving out some time.
No problem. I really do appreciate Josh having me on. I know I'm a long time buyer of yours. I've listened to many of your podcasts, so a lot of great content. So I'm looking forward to having a great one-on-one with you, tete for tete.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll share some war stories here for sure. So Van, you're semi-retired. I know you obviously are managing your portfolio, kind of overseeing it as a kind of an asset manager. You coach some new investors on buying their first multifamily property, but tell me a little bit more about 2022. Like, what are some goals and objectives that you have and some projects that you're working on?
I'm really focused on helping new multifamily investors in acquiring, once they've acquired their first property, and what is it, the strategies, and what are the things that they should be doing in being able to carry out a renovation or a value add project. Like, we all go into these types of investments with goals and projections associated with these assets, and I really do enjoy that engagement. I'm at that age stage in my life where I've been very blessed in my life, and I've just enjoyed the engagement with typically younger folks that are young whippersnappers that get involved in the multifamily space, and they're looking for some sage old advice from a veteran of over 30 years.
I love it. So let's peel back the onion on that sage old advice. I love it. So let's say, like, I talked to a lot of even some students that I mentor, some different people that I've worked with over the years, people in my mastermind group. A lot of them are trying to get in the game, buy that first 20 unit or 50 unit or 80 unit deal, kind of stay under the radar so they're not competing with the big boys that do the 100 unit and up deals. And so, they're buying something, it's distressed, maybe it hasn't been updated in 15, 20 years. And it's, like you said, value add. Maybe it's unit turns, it's commons, it's, water conservation programs. So somebody comes to you and says, Van, I want to do multifamily. I got a 50 unit deal I just bought. Like, how do we unlock and schedule out and really evaluate this thing to do the best value add program? What are some of the questions and some things you want to know off the rip to start to formulate a game plan?
Sure. And typically that is the case when folks reach out to me. And typically new multifamily investors done tremendous amount of due diligence during that period of time in underwriting, and then ultimately finalizing that deal. So there's a wealth of information already there. And it really is my job as a coach, consultant, is to draw that information that you already know out to the forefront and put a comprehensive plan together in terms of what it is that we're looking to accomplish in this particular asset. And typically I get started with my engagement in identifying what are the specific goals associated with this project. Like ultimately, a lot of pie in the sky kind of gray. We need to really define what it is specifically. What are we looking to accomplish? So that could be, multifamily space. Typically, it's raising rents from a certain period, from a certain dollar amount up to a certain dollar amount. Sure. In some rare cases, it could be a flip as well, doing some quick renovations and then putting the property back out on this overheated real estate market that we're in. And so it's really identifying, crystallizing, like what is specifically is that goal. And once we have that established, I really want folks to go out there in the marketplace and validate those goals, like really on a granular level. Like when we're going through our due diligence and underwriting phase, there are, those preliminary kind of junkets of information that we pull out of comparable properties in the area, but are really in this process of trying to figure out our goals and validating them. I want individuals to go out there in the marketplace and really fine tune what it is that we need to do to the property in order to reach our goals. So specifically going into comparable properties. So if you have an asset that has an average of $800 in rent and you want to jack up those rents to $1,100, well, what is comparable in that marketplace that's being able to pull that $1,100? Do they have brand new windows? Do they have porcelain tile or ceramic tile? What have they done? What kind of common amenity features or amenities, the standard and the conditions of it? All of those really granular details need to be pulled out and to be able to get to the point where we understand and validate the goal that we're trying to accomplish. Rarely there are situations where goals that have been established you can't realize them, because as much as we might want to get to a point where we're raising rents to $1,100, $1,200 a month, if the unit sizes are comparable 1,000 square feet and yours is only 700, we don't have a magic wand to be able to dramatically all of a sudden increase the square footage of those units, right? So we're limited in what we can do. But typically with multifamily investors who are smart, intelligent, we don't get to that point, but really we need to get in and fine tune what it is that we need to do to our property and establishing those clear objectives associated with what we need to do. And then we move on through that process. And once we've been able to get that, Josh, then we got to go and really do a self-examination. We need not a self-examination, an examination of the property itself. What I call it is in that phase, what I call is creating a needs and wants list, where you go out there and you do an evaluation of your property and identify things that need to be done. Like if there's a hole in the roof, a pothole in the driveway, those are things that have to be done right away. Like if you don't take them, then you got liability or you're going to cause further damage associated with that asset. And then on the want side, those are things that we put based on what we feel from the information we gather from the marketplace. On the want side, those are things that we can address, we should address. So things like that lime green carpet from the 1980s, that kind of carpet that even though it's serviceable and functionable, that would be an item that we would put under the want side, so that in the event, if we have the dollars to be able to throw at that, we will address that renovation, that repair. But if we don't, then we can't. And we got to prioritize that. And then part of that, once you've been able to get that, evaluate your property, you need to figure out how much money you have in the kitty for this. And that would be part of that whole CapEx budget that you put aside. And it's really there where you figure out, based on your needs and want list and the amount of money that you've set aside, what are the things that you can do and you can't do. Unfortunately, we don't have unlimited funds to be able to throw at and solve every single issue or problem associated, right, of your renovation that we can think of in these. We have to be very selective. And I find often new multifamily investors who come into this space, everything's changed. Everything's 10x, and depending on the complexity of the property you've acquired. Some properties are, got elevators, some properties have balconies, some properties have underground parking garages, and all of those have their whole host of factors and issues associated with them that you need to really be careful of, because you can get into some real costly CapEx stuff. And I'm sure you've run across them, Josh, yourself, right?
Absolutely. I almost lost my mind about a week ago. We bought a building, actually bought 3 complexes all at the same time, $15 million purchase. Talked to the broker right before closing. It said, hey, this garage, this leak, is this repaired? This is part of the seller's due diligence. Broker says, yep, I'll go out and check on it. Yep, it's repaired. Well, of course, he went on a sunny day. And then I was there after closing, and I asked my partner, I said, Tyler, it's leaking. Like, we're in the garage. It's what? So, the seller is going to go back and send the contractor back to fix it. So it's not going to be an issue, but it certainly could have been. And I was a little disappointed. I said, what system do we have that just failed, right before closing, that this garage was supposed to get repaired and fixed? And here we are 2 weeks after closing, and it's obviously leaking on the cars inside the garage, right? For a new investor, that could be a major, major problem, right? With our experience and our horsepower and the money we have, it's not as big of an issue. But for a new investor, you buy your first 25 unit or your first 75 unit, you don't have that extra $25,000 or whatever it costs in the budget. It could be a major, major problem. So, Van, I want to peel back the onion real quick on when you said goals, raising rent, you specifically mentioned comps. Do you coach your people to actually physically go secret shop the comps and walk through the commons and walk through the hallways and act as if they're a future resident on those comparable buildings?
Absolutely. If you have that opportunity, nothing beats actually physically going in all these competitors of yours. These are all competitors, and being able to experience how the property manager is dealing with you, seeing the actual individual suites, the daylight, the types of renovations, and you really need to create a detailed list of that experience so that you know what you are up against in terms of what you need to do to your property to get to that to the competition's same level.
Right.
I know it's difficult for a lot of remote investors that to do that, and so they need to rely on pictures. They need to rely on property managers that you have a relationship with to be able to give you the lowdown on every single property that's out there that's comparable to the one that you're about to purchase. They really get dialed down and know exactly what it is that you need to do in terms of that value add. You're going to be, the monies that you're going to be putting in and the proper amount to set aside. See, this is a relationship game. Like, there's a whole variety of things that folks need to have put in place prior to making that first purchase of that multifamily. Having that relationship with property managers is important. Having relationships with some contractors to get a sense of what's out there in the marketplace in terms of cost is important. And once you've been able to have those, and you move on and you go out there. But at the same time, there's a level of experience, Josh, that you have been able to obtain over the years that you've done this, that unfortunately you can't go to YouTube videos and read a book on, right? You got to get out there. And one of the experiences I shared with you, you agreed upon, the things about, things of these certain areas of properties or buildings have their own perils or have their own issues. And the only way you can figure that out is through the experience of actually acquiring one and going through that to know, like, a building that's built in the era of the 50s has certain things that you should be mindful of versus something that's built in the 70s, right? So, and unfortunately, there isn't a book or YouTube videos you can grab to be able to help you out in that. So that's where I step in, and that I've literally gone through thousands of renovations on the multifamily, single family home apartments, commercial buildings, you name it. I've done that. And it's through those experiences, and I'm still learning, by the way. Nobody can outright learn. There's new things that you pick up every single day. But I've got just like yourself, you have a basket full of experiences that you can then rely upon to be able to move forward and turn lemons into lemonade. Ultimately.
Yeah, no doubt. Even like next week, we've got a leasing event next Saturday from 10 to 1, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We've got about 24 units that are coming out of CapEx, coming out of construction. They're hard turns. So they were 1960s construction, carpet, some of them had original cabinets, original countertops from years ago. We tore those apart. And now we've got LVP in, we've got 5.5-inch trim, we got shoe mold, we've got, the new white shaker cabinets, black matted hardware, stainless steel appliances, butcher blocks and granites, the whole thing, right? So, and even to your point though, but next week, like Monday, I'm going in the field to that building to go see it all. And I'm going to roll up my sleeves and put on my boots and work side by side with my make ready crews and my construction crews. Because when you finish up a renovation like that, it's that last 2 inches that matters, right? Getting the appliances set, making sure the gas lines are working to the stoves, like making sure all the cardboard's thrown away, making sure the laundry rooms don't have materials and supplies and old appliances laying around. All this, you're laughing. I can see you because
you know why? Because it's the last 5-10% of that renovation value add is that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But it takes so long to get through those, those punch lists, all the items that you listed. And I'm chuckling because I know what you're coming from. It's just, it's really, for that unseasoned person who's involved in that, it's very frustrating. But I know where you're coming from. Those are very important stuff that you got to get in there and do you got to be mindful of it. You got to get in there and roll up your sleeves on, because that's where, ultimately, at the end of the day, nobody gives a, I'm going to swear a bit, crap, what's behind the walls. It's the finished product is where the dollars are, right? Where you are able to raise value. It's not what's behind the walls. Nobody cares about that.
Yeah. And then what's interesting is I find that like, that's really where you're learning. If you have and try to create like a franchise type of model where you're stamping out the same unit turns in that building or in your next building, like we try to buy a lot of buildings in the same markets and submarkets and then do the same product in every unit. Like you're learning about that last 5 or 10%, the choke point that your contractors or your make ready crews, why are they not getting across the goal line? And if you can identify that and then create solutions, you can't do that sitting behind a computer on a Zoom call or in a meeting. It's only something you can see. And so I'm using this as basically a comparison point where you need to do that during your due diligence phase as well, which is what Van just described, by going into the comps, walking through and acting as if you're a prospective resident, trying to get into a unit, get into the commons, see what kind of amenities they have, and do it at the beginning. And then also be doing it as you're doing that last 5 or 10%, right? How many times, Van, have you been into, especially when maybe you were new at this and your contractor told you like, yeah, we're almost done. I just have a few things left to do. I'll be out of there on Friday. And then you show up on Friday or Monday and you're like, there's way more than a small punch list here.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. And that is one of the things that I preach to folks is when you're engaged with a contractor, identified that person you want to do business with, that you really gotta, unless you have an established relationship with them, you really, even in an established relationship, you should always have instituted a progress and a payment schedule that coincides with one another, so that at every milestone that you, as you're moving forward through that 8, 12, 20 week, whatever renovation value add process, then you have each milestone where you have an update in terms of what the progress is. And then based on that progress, you get paid. And oftentimes I find that a lot of multifamily investors, just real estate investors in general, they're having a difficult time finding contractors to even quote on their work. And then on top of that, whoever they're able to find, they get quotes all over the place. And then they give up these huge deposits right from the get-go, 30%, 50%. I've even heard some people give 70% up front before a finger has been lifted. And so what do you expect in that situation? Like, what do you expect? That contractor's got you by the proverbial, you know what, and he can jerk you around any which way they want. So
that's right.
Stop treating them like McDonald's. There's a little saying that if you've listened to some of the podcasts I've been on, stop treating your contractor like McDonald's. You know, when you go to McDonald's, you got to pay up front before you get your hamburger. Stop doing that. When they produce, that's when you pay. Yes, you give a certain dollar amount in terms of mobilization costs or down, materials they need to bring on your job site, on your project. But these ridiculous things of 30, 50, 70%, that's outrageous. How do you expect to be in control of your own project? And that's why people lose control. Because is that they're sitting there waiting every single day with a pit in their stomach, hoping that this is the day that the contractor is going to show up and do some work. No, you don't. So in your situation, which you described, yeah, everything's done by Friday. If you've got a paycheck, if you got a money's waiting for them, make sure you get it all done before you get paid, buddy. Right. And trust me, when you have that type of a relationship with them and they understand they're not going to jerk you around. They're going to complete everything because money, they want their money. And the only way to be able to control a contractor is through money. It's just the way it is. Money controls everything. So
that's fantastic stuff. So Van, is there, with all your 30 years of experience and your properties that you own, coaching investors on how to get going, is there a couple things that you think are like must-dos? Like, what are the key elements to really get and buy that first multifamily property, in your opinion, and then do it right the first time and kind of get off on the right foot? There's so many people in our audience that already own multifamily, but there's a fair amount that are trying to do their first deal. Maybe they're a really good resi investor trying to get into that first 50 unit. And they're wondering, like, well, what's it really going to take to be successful? I'm kind of afraid. I wish I would have done it sooner. I haven't done it yet. I'm kind of skeptical. Like, is this going to work for me? I'm really good at single family. I'm afraid to get into commercial. So what are some of these, from your perspective and coaching people, doing it yourself, what are maybe 3 or 4 or 5 kind of key elements to make that first deal go?
Well, you kind of touched on this, in that you have to get into systems and processes in being able to scale your portfolios. And that's one of the things that when I get involved with new multifamily investors, I teach them these types of things that you, Josh, have already incorporated in your business. I guarantee that you have some sort of a boilerplate, detailed scope of work somewhere that you are able to pump out to your contractors, and they know exactly whether it's ABC or XYZ guy who comes in new to the fold or someone you've done business with in the past. They know what you want. You've got to nail down to the particulars. The processes associated with how to paint that wall. Before you paint it, you got to clean it, you got to sand it, you got to do this. And then the types and the specifications associated with that paint. A detailed scope of work. If there's a one takeaway, folks, from aside from a whole bunch of other nuggets that we talked about, create yourself a detailed scope of work where you do all of that homework beforehand, so that when you go out and you tender this to a bunch of contractors that you know or don't know, every quote that you get back is apples to apples comparison. If you don't have that to provide out there to tender, then you end up with quotes coming in that are all over the place. And if you go to your GC, shame on you if you go to your contractor to get them to create that scope of work for you, because it doesn't work that way. You need to specify exactly what it is that you're looking to accomplish within that renovation value add project, and then you tender it out, and then you get quotes back that conform to that. And it's part of that contract that you have with the contractor that they have to abide by that. And that's the number one, the biggest problem that I see, especially in the single family home space. If you were going to the commercial side, there is I don't know of any projects of some scale that doesn't have some type of a detailed scope of work where everybody knows what their roles or responsibilities are and how everything is supposed to play out, right? So that's the biggest one. And the last thing is, remember the whole thing about, for sure, you got to, whoever contractor you engage with, you got to establish right from the get-go that we have a clear understanding what the responsibilities are, create a payment schedule and a progress schedule. And on a weekly, every 2 weeks, whatever that case is, you have a meeting of the minds. Where are we? So that, and based on that progress, they receive payment, so that you're in control of your project. So if this guy's not producing, guy or girl is not producing, you can bounce them out of there. So often I find folks that they've paid up so much money and they're just hoping that the contract is going to come through. And you can't be in that situation. At the end of the day, we're professional business owners. We have to act like professional. And those are the two really big takeaways that hopefully people will get from this, from listening, is that you need to do that.
One other real world solution is, right, people don't realize how cheap these Connex boxes are, these mini mobiles, $150 a month to get a giant container, right? So if you buy a 50 unit complex and you could put a medium-sized mini mobile Connex box on site there and get a nice locking system, which they usually come with, you can buy all the material at scale, buy it all, whether it's slabs of granite, whether it's butcher block, all the cabinets, the toilets, the LVP flooring, the black matted hardware, the tub surrounds, the tile, the vanities, stock it, right? So that your contractor, you're literally just paying them really for labor, right? They're just, that's the scope of work. They're grabbing the stuff out of the Connex box, the mini mobile, they're walking it in and they're installing it. After the demo is done and after the walls are painted and all that kind of stuff is finished, bam, you're going right back in and you're just basically, they're slamming it all together. We found that, like, take an 800 square foot apartment unit, they could do that if the stuff's on site and they just do labor roughly 2 weeks. They could take a unit, hard turn it in 2 weeks because of all the things you said. We have systems and process. They have a detailed scope of work. They have a payment schedule and the stuff sitting in the Connex box that they can readily go get. Now, does stuff disappear from the Connex box? Come on. Of course, there's some stuff. They take a P-trap here or there, whatever they're going to take. Okay, there's going to be some bleed. I get it. But the speed now that which we can operate to turn multiple units in 2 weeks end to end. And the other thing I would say, Van, is look, we've had contractors come on site before and be like, yeah, I could turn 10 units at one time. BS. Now, they can if they experienced. So what we found is the rule is we're only going to give a new contractor or a crew that works for a contractor 2 units to start with. Start with 2, right? Let's say it's an $8,000 turn or an $8,500 turn. Roughly half of that is labor, roughly half of that is material. So that's about an $8,000 or a $9,000 labor job for 2 units, right? Give them that, test it out, knock that sucker out in 2 weeks. Then the next time I'll give you 5 units. Knock that sucker out. Then I'll give you 10 and I'll assign you 10 at a time. No more than 10 per crew. Okay, no way. That's just some of our rules of thumb that we've used that have been successful, because we had guys come in and be like, oh, I'm loaded with contractors. I've got all kind of guys. Give me 10 units. You know, it's essentially an $80,000 job, $8,000 a unit. And then you're like 3 months later, they're not even done with the first 2. It's happened to me. Ask me how I know. So those are some additional rules of thumb that if you're a new investor, you're doing your first deal and Van's coaching you up, some little nuggets there.
Absolutely.
You get a little bit of experience, Van. This is what's cool. Lowe's and Home Depot, ever talk about these supply chain problems? The big box stores, they're not really having supply chain problems right now. They're actually, the prices are going down. Back in the middle of COVID, about a year ago, we were paying $2 a square foot for LVP flooring. It started at $1.50. It went up to $1.75, up to $2. Now it's back down to $1.26 for the same style flooring. So the big supply houses are able to get it. So now they're even offering lines of credit. Well, you can actually buy 50 toilets and 50 vanities and 50 units worth of flooring. And then they know that that order's coming in, but they're not actually charging you for it until you take delivery, right? So there's some other things, if you're going to do this at scale, right? Once you're good at it and get going, there's some ways now that you can like leverage your capital. You could actually have a 30-day or 60-day payment term with Lowe's, get the stuff moved in stock, but not get billed for it till you use it. You literally use it. It gets delivered within the next month. You're using it all. Then you can go take your draw from your lender, right? So the total capital that you have to basically borrow or get from limited partners actually goes down. And that experience comes with time. If maybe this is up your second building, your third building, your 10th building, whatever, like Van and I have done. But again, there's some tips there. So
all that stuff you just laid off, I love it. And I do the exact same thing. And it's just a part of the process of you trying to get to figuring it out and implementing it. And when you're working on your business instead of in the business, those are the types of things that once you've established a base, you start to tinker. You're just like the great Oz behind the screen. You start to pull the levers and you see, okay, there's an opportunity here, an opportunity there. And that's one of the things that you and I can offer to folks who haven't gone through, are not there yet. These bunch of things, processes, and systems to be able to really elevate their game. And that's what I really enjoy in this is like exactly everything that you just said. I love it because it's the kind of stuff that I've gone through in my life, and I'm helping others implement it, and they see tremendous success and be able to reach their goals of being a multifamily investor, a bona fide successful multifamily investor.
Are you ready to automate and explode your real estate investing? We're searching for extremely motivated individuals who are sick and tired of wasting time and want to finally see real results from their real estate investing business. We're searching for investors looking to get to the next level and become a bigger, better version of themselves while being a more successful real estate investing entrepreneur. Apply for mentoring and coaching at joshcantwellcoaching.com/podcast. That's joshcantwellcoaching.com/podcast. I love it. Van, tell us a little bit more about your start, and especially in particular, maybe some early challenges that you faced and maybe even as a side story, some of the people that you're mentoring and coaching and consulting with now, what are some of their choke points and trouble spots when they're getting going?
Sure. Well, I don't want to go too far into I was just a product from the 60s. I was born and raised in Chicago, and how I got really started in this business was through my family indirectly, in that instead of my parents, we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Chicago, and instead of buying their dream home, they learned that the apartment building that we're living in actually had gone up for sale. And that's how, as a child growing up, I got involved in this whole multifamily business. But because of the difficulties, starting off, all the work that was associated with that building, we were doing on our own. The electrical, the plumbing, the painting, all that kind of stuff I was exposed to early on in my life. Then I went off to university, graduated. I could have moved on, become a lawyer, got accepted. But I didn't feel it. I was told by someone just to, go out there and find things that make you happy, and that's what, being that whole general contractor renovation was what really I enjoyed. So in the late 80s, I got started being a general contractor in Chicago, and I started to develop a client list. I started to develop my business. And I kept running into these real estate investors, these guys who would buy properties, flip them, and, create portfolios. And in the late, 1991 was my first fix and flip that I did. And I made 30 some odd $1,000 on it. And then back then in 1991, that was a full-time salary for a good professional. And I made it in 4 or 5 months, and I got hooked on it. And so as I was developing my general contracting business, I was also doing real estate investing also as well. And I was doing really well, but it got to the point, because I had a mindset coming from the background that I came with my parents of being a micromanager, doing everything myself, that I started to hit against that ceiling that I couldn't expand either on my general contracting or the real estate investing. It got to the point where, Josh, I was sleeping on job sites. I remember one particular job site, I was sleeping there and I'm staring at this freshly painted ceiling, wondering, like, at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, like, what the hell am I doing? This can't be normal. This is not good. I remember going, like, I bought a 48 unit building. I got married on July the 28th, and on August 1st, July 31st, I did a closing for a 48 unit building. And I told my wife, sorry, I can't go on my honeymoon. We didn't go on our honeymoon until a year later. That's how driven and focused I was. And I'm still married. I got a great wife. So it's like really crazy stuff. So I was focused and dedicated being an investor. And right now, what I see, a lot of the difficulties that multifamily investors, or just general real estate investors going in, is you don't know what you don't know. And so you come across situations where you have an issue, a plumbing issue in a property. And so you contact one contractor, they tell you one thing, you contact another contractor, you get another thing. And now you're going to put it in a difficult position to figure out, who do you trust? Who do you rely on? You send out requests for quotes, and you ask 20 people to give you a quote, and only four answer their phones, and only 2 guys will show up. Why? And those are the things the difficulties that I find with the engagement I had with clients in this multifamily space, is really to figure out how do I create processes and assistance to be able to, they can acquire the asset. They figured out, that whole component of finding a great deal. But this whole other side that nobody really wants to talk about is, how do you create the value? How do you do the renovation where you don't lose your shirt, that you actually are able to plan and manage it successfully to get to your goal? And that is where a lot of people struggle with, because nobody wants to talk about it. If you go across the whole internet space there and talk about flipping houses, there's courses, great stuff. Oh, how to raise money, great stuff. But nobody wants to get down to the minutia about how the hell, once you acquire a great deal, how do you actually get it to the point where it is a great deal? Because I've seen so many great deals where they get screwed up, where they didn't put enough monies off to the side, or they over rented. How many times do you come across properties that are over renovated? They spent too much money to get to their end goal. Right. So that's what I love about this engagement with investors. I really love it.
Yeah, we for a while, we were completely vertically integrated, right? We were buying the properties, we were doing the acquisitions, we were doing the renovations and property management. And what we found was we had to give up something. And we really found that the money was in the renovation, like you're talking about, because essentially it would rent itself out, or it would sell itself if it was a great product. You can't sell a premium house or rent a premium unit if the construction work and the quality of the craftsmanship is bad. So we put the focus on the craftsmanship, the focus on the system, the process, the billing, making sure that the right product was there. And then we were like, oh my God, we're getting rents way over pro forma, way early. And so, like you said, nobody really wants to talk about it. They just want, oh, how can we raise rent? How can we increase value, raise rent, raise rent, raise rent? Well, increased rent comes from either demand through population migration, right? Like jobs and people moving into your area, or you simply have a better looking product than all your competition. And we're right back to the beginning of the interview, Van, where we talked about going and walking your comps. So those are some real ways to provide value and increase rent. Like if you're in the path of progress, you're betting on appreciation, you're betting on growth. There's a whole strategy around that and it works. There's also like what I do in Cleveland and what Van's doing in Ohio, Michigan, like not these super sexy markets, but to buy deep value add, create a great product. And then you're fighting, well, your comps are 1980s, 1970s, 2000s product. And you essentially have what looks like new construction on an older building. It's a huge winner for us. Van's done the same thing. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. I just to further just quickly add, like there are in every area, Cleveland, for example, you named off of, I'm active over there. Even if in those areas are submarkets that are doing gangbusters, and it's our job to identifying those tertiary markets and being able to exploit them. And what you just named off is exactly that's kind of stuff that I preach, that I've done in my life, and I've seen tremendous results from. There's something to be said when you're getting started off in multifamily to identify properties that cash flow immediately. And I find so many folks that, depending on the geographical area that you are in, that some areas don't allow you to do that. There's just craziness in terms of the cap rates and stuff like that you have to buy units, properties at. So identifying these areas where there's a cash flow at the end of the day is what pays the bills. And then ultimately, then you, as a real estate investor, you might very well transition into acquiring properties, for appreciation's sake. And what you've been able to identify, which it is very, very smart, Josh, because, and unfortunately, a lot of folks can't do that because, if I got clients that are in California that got properties in Cincinnati, I've got clients in New Jersey who've got properties in Tampa Bay, so they're doing this remotely. They understand the need to identify properties that are great deals and cash flow, but they got to do it out of their own home areas. So yes. Now the struggle is being able to create processes and systems that you can remotely, which I have helped these folks in, being able to successfully plan and manage out a renovation value add and get them to the promised land, get them to hit all their goals and projections.
Yeah, I love it. We're fortunate. People don't realize, and I've kind of let the secret out a little bit here, but look, I mean, in the Midwest, even if you're just in Ohio, you got three really different markets: Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, right? Cleveland is true Rust Belt, right? Not a lot of growth, not a lot of population migration. So you can buy deep value add, 1960s, 70s construction, do really nice value add plays, no cash flow for the first year or two or three. But then when you hit stabilization, refi, the thing cash flows like crazy. You put a lot of work in up front, you force the appreciation. It's a great strategy. We do it all the time. Now, Columbus, right? There's just holy technology, holy Amazon and Intel and, Google and all these major players. Columbus is almost like investing in the Sun Belt. It's an appreciation play because of all the population migration. So if my wife would let me, I would move to Mansfield, which is like the least sexy place in the world. That is where they filmed Shawshank Redemption, right? Shawshank, the movie.
Yep.
The Mansfield Correctional. I would move there so I could be 1 hour to Cleveland, 1 hour to Columbus, and then I'd have a hyper appreciating market and I'd have a deep value add market. So we're investing in those markets now, but I live in Cleveland. It's cool. It's fun. It's been here forever. So Van, let's wrap up with this. Let me ask you a couple quick questions, quick answers. We call it our final five, and just kind of about advice and some things like that we haven't touched on yet. So let me ask the first question. What is your favorite way to find deal flow right now?
Relationships. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't have or my team goes through an opportunity. It's because of relationships that I've been able to create with power teams in those areas of that I invest in that I've been in for over 20, 30 years. So it's from relationships.
Relationships, long-term thinking. Love it. Van, what's your favorite way to kind of fill up your capital stack and get access to different types of capital?
Well, right now I don't have to worry about that because I got enough coming in, and I'm actually just identifying opportunities is where I'm struggling with. But back in the day, JVing was how I got started. And I encourage even multifamily investors. There's a sweet spot between that 5 to 30 unit building, size that you can really structure up a nice JV so that you can go in with very little the way of your own capital.
Love it. Love it. Van, who do you think's been the mentor that's had the biggest impact on your life? Like who's helped you and kind of pulled you up?
I kind of touched on this. I got stuck in a real bind back in the early 90s. And I came across a real estate investor who had a portfolio, a suntan. He was beautiful. And I in my moment of weakness, I reached out to that individual. I said, "Hey, I need your help." And he charged me a lot of money, but he was able to sit me down and show me the ropes. And I can't stress, and I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on self-improvement, coaching, mentorship, all that stuff. And I'm sure you have, Josh, too. There's something to be said. It's like playing guitar. You want to play the guitar, you can go on YouTube and try to figure it out. In a couple of years, maybe you might strum a song. Or you hire a music teacher, sits you down and slaps you upside the head if you make a mistake. I much rather, and I've learned in my life that I'd rather pay for somebody to be able to sit me down and show me the ropes, and it's a lot quicker and avoid a lot of mistakes. Because in this real estate market, just real estate in general, if you make a wrong move, it can be devastating. So I'm a product of coaching, and I'm a big proponent of it.
I love it. I love it. Van, listen, I know our folks are going to want to reach out to you, and I know you make yourself available to do some coaching and consulting, especially for these newer investors. I know they can reach out on your main website, vansturgeon.com, vansturgeon.com, vansturgeon.com. Any other place, Van, that people can reach out to you, connect with you?
I appreciate that, Josh. I'm all over social media, from LinkedIn to Facebook, Instagram. I love talking to people. I really do this because I'm passionate, and so if there's anybody who's really contemplating and struggling, you're more welcome to reach out, and I'll do what I can for a 30-minute, 1-hour conversation. I'll be able to give you some real tidbits, and then hopefully it'll help you be able to reach your goals and aspirations of being a multifamily investor.
Van, that's fantastic. I appreciate you being on and carving out some time today for us and all your nuggets of advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, Josh. It's been a treat.
Well, hey guys, listen, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Van. Man, I love his energy. I love his passion for the value add side of the business. And like we talked about in the interview, I really feel like the opportunity to raise rent is because of the product that you put out there, and that value add construction side of things is so critical. And so Van had mentioned, number one, understanding your goals. Number two, understanding the comps. Number three, examining the property for needs and wants. Number four, making sure you have enough money. Number five, the systems and process to work with the contractor doing the work. And then finally, the detailed scope of work and the payment and progress schedule. So those are some serious nuggets that I think will really help you in your business. If you have any questions, comments, please reach out to us. You can go to our main website, joshcantwellcoaching.com. And of course, I always love it when people leave ratings, reviews, feedback. If you can open up your phone and leave us a rating or review in Spotify or iTunes or YouTube, that would be huge for us. We'd love to hear feedback and know what we're doing right and wrong. So thank you so much for that. And again, vansturgeon.com. You can reach out to Van if you have any questions as well, and if you're getting started with your first multifamily property. Thank you so much for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
You were just listening to the Accelerated Investor Podcast with Josh Cantwell. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something new, help us build the AI community by leaving a review and 5-star rating on our iTunes podcast channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. To see passive investing opportunities, visit freelandventures.com/passive. To start your journey toward the lifestyle you've always dreamed of with multifamily apartments, apply for one-on-one coaching with Josh at www.joshcantwellcoaching.com.